Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank La Vigne and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you can consider us Car Talk, because we focus on where the rubber meets the virtual road. And with me, as always, on this epic road trip is everyone's favorite applied data scientist, formerly known as a data philosopher, Andy Leonard. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you?
Speaking of road trips, I heard you were on a pretty big road trip recently.
I did. I went to the Pass Summit 2017 out in Seattle. I had a great time catching up with old friends, made some new friends. And, it's always a good trip because not only do you get to do that, which I think is the most important part, by the way, networking. Hanging out with people is the most valuable part, networking, that sort of thing.
Right. And it's always great to meet people in person and talk to them face to face. I don't know what it is, but it's just that human connection. Definitely
so. And I was reminded of that as I went out there. Also got to see some of the new shiny technology that that Microsoft is announcing. And I have to say, Frank, I'm impressed.
Cool. So what did they announce? Well,
I'll start with kind of a focus, which I see as a shift from previous years. Microsoft has been focused on the cloud now for a good 4 or 5 years. And I think that's a good thing. I think they've done well. And the shift this year, and it was subtle, seemed to be more towards hybrid, where you keep some of your data on premises or on-prem, as I heard over and over again, and at the same time, you keep some data in the cloud.
Interesting.
So, I thought a very interesting approach. And again, a subtle shift, but I think a shift towards a more realistic scenario for most enterprises out there using data. For whatever reasons, people want to keep some of their data on premises. And I don't want to upset you, Frank, by bringing this up, but you had a non-positive experience with the cloud in your blog a few months ago.
This is true. This is true.
So I think experiences like that, probably stuff far worse for enterprises has happened, where something unfortunate happens in the cloud and all of the backups that you don't have to worry about. For whatever reason, maybe it's bureaucracy like it was in your case. Maybe it's just, some unfortunate series of events and failures, and the data's just gone. And if you'd have had access to those backups that they're doing automatically for you, it could have been a whole different outcome.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And as bad as my situation was with ClearDB and their ineptitude, which you can go back. We did a whole show on that. I'm not a business. Like, I make money on ads, on YouTube ads, but it's not my primary source of income.
Right.
I didn't lose 10, 13 years of customer data.
Right.
If I had, I would be SOL.
Yeah.
And folks can look that up, what that means. But, got to keep that thing on the clean rating on iTunes.
Absolutely.
But the key is that as bad as it was for me, it was not an extinction level event. If I were a business and I lost customer records that far back, I would be blown out of the water.
Yep.
And I think that most of the time, the cloud is more reliable than most people can afford local IT staff. I think
True.
I think that's a fair statement.
I agree.
But I think there's this psychological element as well as a real practical element, is that once you hand off your data, particularly when you have both, AWS and Azure have kind of this marketplace of third parties, which was my case. Microsoft didn't lose my data.
Right.
It was ClearDB, which was a third party that sold kind of through that marketplace.
Right.
And I'm not the only one to have issues with that third party in particular, but I mean, I could totally see like the desire to, a just in case backup. If I had a just in case backup, it would have been a royal pain that took us, but it would not have been kind of quite the disaster that it was.
Right.
And, I spent, if you go to franksworld.com, I've done a lot to rebuild. I switched templates, really changed the format of the site, focus more on data science, which, over 13 years, the focus of something kind of changes over time.
Sure.
And I doubt people are looking for Silverlight 2 upgrade information.
Probably
anymore.
not, but it's the principle of the thing. And
That's
at
the principle of it, yeah.
I want to take this opportunity to commend you for rising from those ashes.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think we get along as well as we are, we're good friends. I consider us good friends. If you don't, it's okay. Don't say anything.
No, I do.
It would be embarrassing if you don't. But I'm kidding. But one of the reasons we are is because the work ethics align, and a lot of other ethics. We share a lot in that area, and it just, I was very impressed with how you responded to that. I got the reaction, and I think it was a justified reaction, not an overreaction. I have no idea how I would have acted in that situation. Probably not nearly as well as you did. But at the same time, you turned this into an opportunity. You pivoted, as they say in business speak these days, and you repurposed franksworld.com. Not only that, but you shared your experience, and I was one of the benefactors of your sharing. In fact, I moved AndyLeonard.blog just the past week after the past summit. I moved it to a more managed provider, and one of the things that I get out of this managed provider, of course, it's a faster site, which is nice for the people who've gone to AndyLeonard.blog in the past. I apologize. It was terribly slow, painfully slow. It's better, much better now. But I also invested in automatic backup, and I've got backups running, once a week and dumping into my Dropbox. Those are set up now, and they're running. I'm rebuilding dilmsuite.com this week and trying to get, everything set up for that as well. It's a little more tricky because there's sales and stuff in there. So it's your experience, Frank, really helped. It helped me, and I'm sure it helped others.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that because, it's with blogs, even for technical people, and I obviously consider myself a technical person.
Sure.
I don't put a lot of thought into my blog. I mean, I put a lot of thought on my blog, but I don't put a lot of thought into the mechanics of running my blog.
Right.
I mean,
you don't want to.
No, you don't want to because it's meant to be. I mean, if I had a whole marketing department, obviously somebody would be in charge, but I don't have time for that.
Right.
You know, which is great. We have podcastwebsites.com who runs the podcast, the website for the podcast.
Right.
And they've been awesome.
They are awesome.
And we actually have an affiliate link that we'll put in the show notes, and we get if you sign up with them, we get a little bump per month, which is cool. I think we've made $20 now.
Awesome. I
know, man. That's, a latte for you and me, right? And a happy meal for the kids. Champagne and caviar dreams, baby.
That's it. That's us. Grant Cardone says dream big.
There you go. So, I mean, the key is that they're not only do they have a great affiliate program, but I mean, they have great customer service. And, when I post on social media that, basically I lost all my data, like the lady who works there was like, checked my account just to make sure that we were okay. And she messaged me like, we can't find anything wrong with your account. And I'm like, oh, no, it wasn't you.
How cool is that, though?
That is cool. I mean, that's customer service right there. So
Absolutely.
If those guys are listening, you whatever you're paying her is not enough.
They did a fantastic job. They took care of us.
Absolutely. But no, I mean, that's the thing. Like, when you're running a podcast, and that's why I went with podcast websites and it's not a commercial, I swear. But there's a number of ways. I was like, first, I think you and I set up a temporary WordPress site on one of the virtual servers you have somewhere. And then we were looking at it and we were like, oh, God, this is another site to maintain.
Right.
And as much as I love engineering, I have bigger fish to fry, things like neural networks and fun stuff like that. Rebooting servers and like messing with that is not something that's really on my radar. And I think there's a lot of people in that position who kind of are technologists and they have a blog, but they don't necessarily want to belabor the basic points of, running MySQL or whatever. I mean, fun fact, I once had, there used to be, do you remember Community Server?
Yes.
So before Community Server, a guy named Scott Watermastick, who was at the time like a MVP RD type in the early 2000s up in Jersey.
Yeah.
He wrote something called .text, and that was a blog engine. And it was open source and it was free. So I was so inspired by that, I actually ran .text.
Nice.
And I ran .text up until about 2011. Wow. Which to put it in perspective, when I told him, I met him, he's left the Microsoft kind of space, but I saw him at TechEd in like 2006 or 2007, and I told him, I was like, hey, I'm still running .text. And I managed to get it. He said, really? Wow. It's like, what are you going to do when you upgrade to ASP.NET 2.0? And I'm like, well, I already did. And he goes, how'd you get it working? I was like, I got it working. And I think he was amazed and alarmed at that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to be said about, services like that. I mean, things like podcast websites allows us to really focus on the work, which is,
right.
We do the podcast and then you edit it almost all of the time and fix all of my mistakes and make me sound really, really smart. I don't know how you do that, but that's an awesome filter you're applying.
It's technology.
That's it. Yeah. And and then, but that's kind of the whole thing about the cloud. And that kind of, brings me back to what I enjoyed and I really appreciate about Microsoft's new approach. And not that it's new, but they seem now to better recognize and to focus a little bit more on these hybrid scenarios. And the whole idea behind that is, let's just take the IT part of this and, we're either going to mask it or we're going to do it for you, probably cheaper than you can afford to pay someone else to do it. And we're just going to free up some time, which is going to create opportunity for you to just do what you want to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's the great thing about the cloud is that, and I think that for a while, everyone went kind of gaga for, cloud everything, cloud this, cloud that.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think there's a real value in it. If I have a business and I already have sunk costs into my IT infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to be able to, instead of expanding my data center or updating my data center, I don't need to do that. I just have what I already have. And then I augment it with the cloud.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of do that now. I mean, I've been playing around a lot with the data science virtual machine on Azure, which is pretty epic stuff, actually.
Yeah.
I'm actually running the Ubuntu version, and I didn't have to mess with installing Linux on a real desktop or anything like that. I didn't have to set up like a dual boot scenario. I just click, and now I have this machine up there, and I could scale it up depending on what my tolerance for cost is.
Yeah.
If I want 64 cores and, 20 GPUs attached to it, I can do that.
That's pretty cool.
I might have to sell a kidney to make that happen, but I mean, I certainly could do it, which is, I mean, the buying that machine outright would be, well, that would be fun. I'm not going to lie, but it'd be a lot of money too.
Well, that was one of the things that, sitting in the peanut gallery and listening to the day one keynote at the PASS Summit, a couple of comments. One of them was, it was actually Brent Ozar put this on Twitter, and he wrote it as an overheard. So I'm not quoting Brent directly. I'm quoting something he overheard. But what he tweeted was, what I'd like to hear is how much that costs.
Right. Right. And I know that there's a controversy about a number of services that have been announced that no one really knows exactly what the costs are going to be.
Well, and I kind of get that. It's, they should wrap some costs around it, but that's been an old thing hanging on to Azure forever. Because I'll go to clients and we'll talk about, helping them migrate to the cloud, and there's all sorts of good architectural reasons to do it. And then, of course, like as clients are, apt to do, they will, ask that question: how much is it going to cost? Right. And I wasn't ever able to give them a really good answer. And I realized after some investigation that there was a really good reason for that. and the answer really is, it depends, right?
Right.
What's an RU? How much of my computing consumes one RU? And that's a very nebulous thing. You have to kind of run it and see. And Microsoft, to their credit, has been very generous about, creating trial periods and stuff like that where people can test stuff out. They can do things like for Azure CosmosDB, they can download the emulator basically that sits on a desktop, and you can do all your development against that. You're not burning any RUs when you hook into Azure. But really interesting stuff. They had, from a data integration perspective, they had a load where they were showing 1.4 million rows per second being loaded into the cloud, which is very impressive. The question, someone sitting next to me, I overheard this. They said, how big's that row? If it's an integer and a bit, yeah. But if it's,
not impressive. Yeah, if it's all varchars and ncars and
exactly, or God forbid, there's some kind of blob in there, a binary large object.
Right.
Good luck with that. And it's not that that doesn't take anything away from the demo. If they're loading an integer in a bit at 1.4 million a second, Frank, that's impressive.
Yeah,
it just is. They were doing more than that, I'm sure.
I mean, that's the challenge of kind of when you're in that role at Microsoft. Ask me how I know. Is you have to craft demos that are easily digestible and relevant, and the person giving the demo is probably not the person setting. I know for a fact is not the person setting the price.
Right.
So it's tough in that role. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, it must have been such a dream role," and in a lot of ways it was. But if they have to pay you to show up, there's a catch. And one of the catches was, and I would always read evals from various events that I did, and some of the demos I did were, I remember one of the demos I gave, I remember this feedback to this day was talking about, it was basically like how great IE 10 was or something like that. And all the work that had gone into improving the HTML engine,
right,
and the JavaScript engine, which, believe me, needed a lot of work. And, I remember showing like, comparisons with Chrome, and that ruffled, I guess Chrome was their favorite browser, so that ruffled some feathers, and it was kind of like, oh, typical Microsoft this, typical Microsoft that. It's like,
right.
A lot of times I was the stand-in for, abusing and being angry at Microsoft.
Right. That's not a good spot.
It's not a good spot. It's not that bad either, but I mean, it was, it's an being an evangelist for Microsoft is an interesting role because it is epically cool in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it's kind of like you have to make everybody happy. And that is making anyone happy can be difficult, but making everyone happy is orders of magnitude harder. And so, I mean, those demos, when they come up with those, and now whenever I see Keynote demos, whether they're Microsoft or otherwise, I'm like, I always look at them with a grain of salt, and I also feel really bad when they fail because I know what that's like.
Right. It makes sense. But there were a couple of really neat things there. Of course, being a business intelligence markup language guy, Biml guy, and I'm also a Biml hero. I'm very proud to be part of that program.
Well, you're my hero, Andy.
What's that?
You're my hero, Andy.
Thanks, Frank. There was a demo using Biml and Azure Data Factory version 2 on stage in the day one keynote. Scott Curry, the guy who invented Biml, he was up there doing the demo. And so Biml got an awful lot of attention out of that appearance. The past summit selected speakers a little differently this year. One of the things they did that was different was they invited some people to speak on some topics. It wasn't a whole lot of people, but they invited Scott and I to present on Biml, which was
cool.
That was really cool. We had Biml in the title. There were probably a good solid 8 or 10 other talks at the summit out of a couple of hundred that had Biml in them somewhere. It was just kind of stealth Biml.
Biml.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's Biml.
Yes, that's it.
And I saw from, if folks haven't seen the live stream, go back on the website or the podcast feed, and you can kind of see a couple of posts you did live from the floor of PASS. One of them was, I see Biml people.
That was fun, and I was sad it got cut off when I was talking with Catherine because she's pretty awesome. And I don't know what happened. There was a lot of people using cell phones there at the convention center, but great interview with Catherine Wilhelmsen, Ben Weissman, and Reeve Smith. And that's the 4 of us were actually 4 of the 11 authors of the Biml book, which was also released finally for print and electronically while we were there at the summit. The electronic version was available I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and maybe it was Thursday that the print version became available. It's out there and you can download it. It's 485 pages of Biml goodness. And
nice.
Not a small book. It took some time to write. Frank, this was my 3rd attempt at even getting the project started. You know how these things go. And it was a great experience, I think. A lot of first-time authors. And, it's great to see people with their name on a book. They haven't yet, at the time of this recording, we're recording in early November 2017, they haven't yet shipped us the physical copies of the book, but they're on the way. And there's nothing that beats that. You've had this experience. There's nothing that beats that experience of holding a physical book in your hand, that you helped write.
Oh, yeah. Seeing your name in print, which is, I know it sounds silly, but it is pretty awesome. I still have my Silverlight book on my shelf.
As well you should.
Yes. And my son, actually, my older son, he was learning about books and stuff in school, and he's like, I don't know, somehow the topic of like, well, how do you write a book or something like that? And I'm like, well, I've done it. And he was just completely amazed. And I was like, yeah, I showed him, and he was like, wow, it's like, and the dedication for the book, because I wrote the book about the same time we found out he was on his way.
Nice.
And the dedication on the book is to him, and I don't think he knew that. He was just like blown away. Like,
that is so cool.
Wait, my name's mentioned in there. I was like, yeah. Which is cool to have that, because, a Silverlight book in 2017 doesn't have much value.
Well,
that one has sentimental value, I suppose, but
yeah.
But I mean, it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's just cool to have that. It's kind of like, I wrote that, and yeah, the technical parts may not be valid, but you're mentioned in it. So absolutely.
And they did that demo. They had a couple of other neat demos. They had they're starting to I guess the tech is out by some companies and is about to come out by others. But they had Bob Ward and Connor Cunningham on stage wearing Seattle Seahawks jerseys, for which I forgive them.
Nah.
But they were running these diskless servers. So I'm not exactly sure what takes the place of the disk. I guess it's these cards that run really fast RAM or something like that. They don't even have SSDs in them, Frank. So,
I was going to say, so this is not just SSDs. I mean, these are diskless servers.
Yeah, true diskless systems.
Very interesting.
It is, and it reminded me that our friend and earlier guest, Kevin Hazzard, wrote a blog post at devjourney.com, his blog, years ago, where he kind of proposed this question that now I'm seeing others ask, but it was, if we were designing databases today from the ground up, you think about when the first data storage occurred, and who knows, probably right after the first storage device was connected, some data was stored on it. But, whatever that looked like back then. And then all through that time, right, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, the early 2000s, what if we were building an engine today to run with today's technology? What would that look like?
Right.
Very intriguing article. And he made a couple of suggestions about how things might be different. Kevin's a smart guy. That show blew my mind that we recorded with him, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
They're super smart. But they posed a similar question on stage, Connor and Bob did, talking about these diskless database servers. So we're seeing yet another evolution of hardware that's going to drive the next evolution of software and applications and whatever as a service, WAS, I don't know what you'd call it, WAAS. There's a lot of that, that seems to be expanding, and it's all good. I think it's all part of, these are all pieces that are going to put together the puzzle for the future. Things like the hybrid approach and this amazingly fast hardware and these distributed computing systems. So
interesting. And that's something also, another former guest, Rimma Nehme, when they were talking about designing what became CosmosDB, they wanted to remove kind of all the past hangups. I don't want to say hangouts, but architectural designs and ideas, and create something that was truly kind of modern and web-based.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting. That's where the real fun stuff, that's where the stuff for the next 10 years is going to come from.
Absolutely. And of course, there was some machine learning / AI demonstrated. They were discussing how, how basically you can now embed AI into applications. And there was a great demo on Power BI.
Nice.
Yep. And speaking of Rimma Nehme, she actually did the day 2 keynote at the summit.
Oh, very cool.
On Thursday morning. Yeah, she spoke for, I guess it was around an hour. It was a fantastic talk. She ran out of time some. I felt bad for her because you and I as presenters know how that goes. And but she did a fantastic job, and she addressed a lot of that stuff early on that she had talked about when she talked with us a few months back. And cool. I actually tweeted during the summit when she was speaking that, you can learn more about her. She shared some of her story about coming to the U.S. and selling door to door and stuff like that, which I enjoy those kinds of interviews because we get to learn so much more about the person,
Right.
And she's an awesome person, I think, a mom and a technologist, and
incredibly brilliant.
Absolutely. Yes.
Her story on how she got into data was just hilarious.
It was.
Go back and listen to it, but I'll leave this kind of teaser. Like when I mouthed off to teachers, it never ended that well for me.
It didn't put you on a path to changing the world, Frank, huh?
It did not. Did not.
That's so funny. But yeah, there's a lot of other info out there. I searched prior to starting this recording, and I couldn't find the keynotes online yet. They'll probably be online soon. Not Microsoft, the PASS organization. Usually it takes them about, I'd say a few weeks, maybe a month or two on the outside to really get all of the editing done. And, I understand. Then they get everything edited. They edit the sessions themselves. If you didn't attend the PASS Summit and something that I've said or Frank has said piqued your interest, you can actually purchase access to those videos of not just I think you can watch the keynotes for free, and there's several sessions you can watch for free as well. But you can actually see all of the sessions if you pay them. And I forget what the amounts are, but pass.org, PASS.org, is the site to go to and learn more about that. And you can purchase this year. You can purchase last year's, I believe.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they do they record everything. They record the screencasts, and they started recording with cameras in the back of the room. So that's part of what's going to take, I think, more time is they're going to now edit video footage of the speaker, actually speaking with the PowerPoint and with the audio, of course, of the speaker speaking. I was in one of those rooms where they did that. I don't know if they did it in every room or not, but I presented on a basic Biml framework Friday afternoon. I was surprised at first off, I'm always surprised when people show up. And I warned the audience when they come into one of my talks that there are smart people talking in other rooms. They may want to go check those out, but nope, they stayed. I did bribe them with books. So,
well, there you go.
I had some books on developing custom SSIS tasks. So, but it was cool. a great show. And Frank, I know the PASS Summit was was a big deal for me, and I'm glad we took some time to talk about it. But I understand you've got some big news. But before you say that, I wanted to correct you just a little. I did change my job title, but I'm not an applied data scientist.
Oh, what are you?
I am the chief data engineer at Enterprise Data and Analytics. Now, I thought that was more applicable since I do more integration than I do science.
Right, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. So while you were out there, I have to ask, did you run into people who have heard of the show? Perchance any fans of the show?
I did. So I was standing outside the exhibition hall, and Eugene walked up to me and stopped me and said, I just wanted to tell you, I've been listening to Data Driven since you guys started. I love it. It's an awesome show. And I stopped him right there. I told him thanks, of course. I broke out the camera. I went to Facebook and I said, would you mind saying this live? And we did another data point with Eugene while we were there.
Ah, very cool. Very cool. I watched that, and I was very happy to hear kind of like, it was cool to hear that feedback that we are unique because we don't focus so much on the hard data science.
Right.
Because that can be very intimidating. One of the funniest things I heard recently was on .NET Rocks. They had a panel discussion about data science, and somehow it came up in one of the comments or whatever. It's like, I did not understand a single word the guy, let me start that over. One of the hosts, I forget if it was Richard or Carl, had basically said, I had no idea exactly what he just said, which means he's definitely a data scientist. Something to that effect. And I think that's a problem in data science right now.
Agreed.
In that it can be very unapproachable for people who aren't already involved in it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you and I were both very conscious of when we created the show, is that we wanted to be approachable, and with the theory that, if you know what ETL is and you already are a data professional or a software engineer, you already have the mental capacity to handle this sort of stuff.
Agreed.
Not the vocabulary necessarily, but that can be added.
Sure. And you can learn more stats.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the thing about it. And Frank, this has happened now the last, I want to say for the last couple of months, everywhere I've been, when I've gone to present or gone to attend an event, someone has walked up to me and mentioned the podcast.
That's cool.
And we just hit a big milestone. Actually, it was a couple of weeks ago, but we did hit, I'll let you say the number. How many downloads?
As of this morning, we're at 26,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I feel like I'm famous or something.
You are the Frank La Vigne.
I've been called worse, I assure you.
But I think we ended up doing 3 data points while I was out there. Definitely go to the Facebook page. There's a link nearby that'll take you to the Facebook page. And you can head over there and watch those they're relatively short recordings. They're data points. The audio is actually on the site where the podcast is, so you can just listen to the audio if you'd like. But they started as videos, and if you'd like to see the video, I'd encourage you to go to Facebook and check that out.
While you're at Facebook, if you like the page, we do those on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
So, and then what typically happens is that within somewhere between 20 minutes and 72 hours, I go through, I edit it, I clean it up, and then I post it to the actual podcast feed. So if you're impatient and you want to see all the bloopers and the mistakes that we make, you can actually watch the live feed.
I think the mistakes are awesome.
They are, particularly I got a lot of feedback on the Dunkin Donuts one, which was a few months ago, where you basically hear me arguing with my older son.
That was perfect. That's classic.
Just sit there, stand there, and be quiet. And I probably should have recorded it before I gave him the sugar at Dunkin Donuts.
Parenting lesson learned.
Right. It was pretty funny. And then there was another one where was the Economist had the cover story about data, and I had him hold the camera, but he was holding the camera like weird, so he kept getting lower and lower and lower. So we were in the parking lot of next to the Barnes and Noble, so I'm there, and I'm basically on the ground by the end of the recording. So I have some training to do for the next generation of camera men out there.
There you go. Well, let's talk about your big news.
So my big news is that I was on a podcast by the Data Podcast by Rajib Bahar, and it's another data science podcast. And what's great about it is that it's also approachable. They don't drop a lot of kind of random, acronyms and phrases that for those just getting into data science, would be confused about. What's great is he has a lot of interesting folks on the show. Some people have been on our show. You also have been on the show. And I was on the show to talk about the Microsoft certification process for become a data scientist. And that was a fun talk. Basically covering kind of what it took to get to the point of, being a certified data scientist.
That's really cool. I bet that's a great show. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I've heard it. It's pretty cool. I'm biased, of course, but no. But Rajib's got a good system going on, and it's really cool. He has a number of episodes. I'm looking at his page on iTunes now. I think they have 28 episodes.
Wow.
So it's a good show. I recommend subscribing to it.
Same here.
And your show was pretty awesome too.
Well, thanks, Frank. It was a lot of fun. I agree with you. He's a great interviewer, and he's got a good system going there. And I look for big things to happen.
No, absolutely. I think the podcast renaissance is definitely upon us.
Agreed.
So I actually just finished up an audiobook.
Yeah, which one?
It was The Future of the Mind by Michio Kaku.
What did you think of that?
It was mind-blowing.
I get it.
That actually was an unintentional pun, but I'll take credit for it just the same. what was really interesting about it, so Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City University of New York, which is kind of like, it's also known as CUNY, which is also referred to as the Harvard of the proletariat. Is another word I've heard for it. But brilliant guy. If you see his face, you've definitely seen him before, because he's one of those scientists that he's really good at explaining really obscure concepts. So he's been in a lot of specials and stuff like that. And this book was interesting because I've been doing a lot more work with artificial intelligence and neural networks and the cognitive toolkit that Microsoft released, the CNTK.
Yep.
Can't talk about some of that work just yet, but I've been spending some quality time with it. So that got me thinking, like, well, what is consciousness anyway? Like, what is mind? Like, what does that mean exactly? And he covers a lot of ground, like everything from kind of like, just basic kind of AI questions to what the future of virtual reality could be and he covers animal, like what the nature of consciousness is. And not so much in the metaphysical sense, because consciousness is a hard thing to get your head around. No pun intended there either. Because consciousness is a subjective experience by definition.
Right.
It's cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. I can't say you think, therefore you are, because I really don't know.
Right.
Can't really say with objective clarity if you exist.
Right.
If that makes sense. But it's pretty cool. And he goes into that and like, what is the nature of consciousness? Can you measure consciousness? But he gets really trippy. He talks about even the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. I mean, it runs the gamut. Like he talks about mental illness, kind of the biological origins of that, how the different genetics between chimpanzees and humans. Can we augment our intelligence with genetic engineering? Spoiler alert, not really. But what would that mean? And he talks about Ray Kurzweil, talking about the singularity and, the ability to maybe transfer your consciousness to a machine. Talks about the future of extreme future of kind of space travel. Yeah. Where, you basically transmit your consciousness from a machine to a robot running on a planet millions of light years away.
Wow.
And you can kind of experience that through kind of like avatar type things. Yeah. It's a cool book because he goes all over the place, and it really makes you think more about what the nature of intelligence is. And as I work more with AI systems, I really I'm not so much scared of, say, of a Skynet situation where the thing becomes self-aware, right, and decides to get rid of people. I think before the machines take over and kill us all, they're going to take all our jobs away first. I think that's going to be. No, but in all seriousness, it's interesting, and it's a real good in-depth exploration of what intelligence is, what artificial intelligence can and can't do, at least within the next 100 years. Yeah. Although I think some of his time frames, he wrote the book in probably 2013, 2014. So some things have changed. So some of the stuff he's talking about that's, some years away have kind of sort of happened. Wow. So it's not entirely up to date. I look forward to what he's going to change in a future edition or a future book. Yeah. But the nice thing about this is that I'm an Audible subscriber. If you buy the Audible book, it's something like, it's like $25. As audiobooks go on Audible, that's a lot. So I get my monthly free credit. And I mention that because if you're a listener of the show, you go over to, is it thedatadrivenbook.com?
It is thedatadrivenbook.com.
Audible's a sponsor, and they'll hook you up with a free listen or a free audiobook. And if you're going to spend your money, you're going to spend if you've got a coupon for a free audiobook, get the $25 one. Don't waste it on a $5 one.
I completely agree. Yeah, I was out just the other day, actually it was yesterday, downloading a book you had recommended to me, another audio book. And I had 3 credits. I'm signed up for like the platinum or whatever. I get a couple
I
credits
totally need
every
to do
month.
that.
Oh, well, I was buying the 3 credits after I used the 1 free, you know, and I figured, well, I can save myself. Some months I only need 1 more credit. It's rare, but some months I only need 1 more. But yeah, when you do that, I mean, if you do the math, right, it's like $11 or $12 a credit if you buy them 3 at a time. And so don't buy a book if it's more than that, use a credit. If it's less than that, just pay for it. So
Right. It's good old fashioned arbitrage right there.
that's it. We'll see. There we go. Data science. We've come full circle, brother.
We totally have. So we have a couple of interesting interviews lined up. We've already recorded a show. And if you want to find out about that, go to join our mailing list. Folks on our mailing list, we call them data drivers. And if you go there, you'll find out ahead of time who's the guest. And also have an interesting interview lined up for next week. So we'll probably be on the show in 2 weeks. As a former colleague of mine, attended a data science boot camp at Stanford University.
Nice.
So she's kind of a noob to data science.
Okay.
So I want to get her kind of impression. 1, because it's Stanford, and Stanford's kind of a big deal in the data science world.
Sure.
And 2, it'll be interesting to see what one of those boot camps is like.
Yeah.
And I was talking to her on Messenger, and she was saying, she said the event was great, but she just feels like there's a lot for her to get her head around.
That's fair.
And I thought, so I think throughout more of the conversation, she was I told her that's completely normal. And then one day she'll be driving or, walking down the street, and then it'll all kind of fall into place.
That's good advice, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah, I spend a lot of quality time thinking on the Beltway.
I'm sorry about that.
Because at 5 miles an hour,
I'm really sorry about that, Frank.
That's all right. It's all right. I moved to DC knowing full well what I was in for. So
I know. I recall talking to you about that. Ago. There's been a guest that we have been trying to get on the show since the beginning. He was one of the first people we thought about. And for various reasons, we haven't been able to schedule him. Well, I don't know if I've talked to you about all of this. I don't, of course, we don't mention guests unless you're a data driver, you don't know ahead of time. But this particular person is a data scientist. They've been doing it for a while. And all of the obstacles that were kind of in our way have been mostly cleared. So a couple more emails. Cool. I think we'll have everything set up, and we will hopefully get that show not only recorded, but aired by the end of the year.
Oh, awesome. And if you feel bad at home and you're listening, I have no idea who he's talking about right now. So even I'm in the dark. I'll have to sign up on that list.
Yeah. That's bad. You have to sign up to your own mailing list to figure out what's going on.
I'm kidding. I really don't know this. I'm kidding in the sense that about the mailing list, but I really don't know exactly who you're talking about right now. I have some theories, but one of the cool things I wanted to get across was, there's this phenomenon called pod fade, which is podcasts will start off strong and then kind of fade.
Right.
The numbers, if you look at it in terms of traffic, that's not really happened. But if you look at our frequency of publishing, it has dropped off because I was doing the daily thing for a while. When I got a real day job, so to speak, I had to kind of readjust my schedule. I do want to do the data science daily thing again. That is still on my radar. But there's some logistical things I want to work out before I start that up. And we haven't been recording as many data points either, but that's just a function of, you've been traveling, I've been traveling, I've been on the road, you've been on the road and stuff like that. So plus it wasn't conference season. Now it's conference season. So
yeah,
there's a lot more interesting things going on.
There are a bunch more interesting things happening. And to be fair, you and I both got incredibly busy at the end of last summer.
Right.
And,
Right.
and people don't realize they don't do this. This is a lot of time. It takes quite a bit of time. And I'll give kudos to Frank. Frank does most of the work. He's an excellent editor. And I've edited some shows. You may have noticed some differences in the style of some of the shows, especially around the editing. The stuff you didn't like was me. The stuff that worked well, that was Frank. Because you've done this for, gosh, what, a half a decade or something.
Something like that. And one of the things that I really credit with my ability, and that sounds really arrogant, but
it's not.
The more you do something, the better you get at it. Right?
Sure.
That's also a fundamental thing in neural networks. The more data you're exposed to, the better you get at it. And one of the things that I did when I was at Microsoft was I did have a daily kind of YouTube show, which was focused on kind of the DC startup tech scene. And for various number of reasons I won't bore people with, I had intermittent support from my leadership on that idea. And so I made sure I could do it within a very short period of time. That's why the show was only a minute long, right? A minute or 2 minutes long. So I was able to kind of produce what I thought was a quality show, video and all, within about 10, 15, 20 minutes at most. And if you do that daily for a couple of months, you get good at it.
That makes perfect sense.
And you know the tools. And the tools I'm using are, all Adobe tools because I'm an Adobe fanboy. And the keyboard shortcuts. You know how to work the system and you do it fast. And you know how to produce something quickly of good quality. Not perfect quality, just good enough. But, I'm not Martin Scorsese. This isn't, a feature-length film costing hundreds of millions of dollars. It's it's different. You can set the expectation of how hard you want to edit. And you've experienced this. You can edit something till, whether it's audio or books, you can edit something till you're blue in the face. And it's, you get diminishing returns in terms of how much you put into it. So you have to know when to say this is good enough.
Right.
And that's something that when you do something daily for a couple of months, you learn that decision boundary by trial and error.
I hear that. I'm still a noob. I cannot snatch the pebble from your hand, Frank.
Patience, grasshopper. Patience, grasshopper.
So we can translate that for millennials. Frank was saying patience, Padawan.
Patience, Padawan. Yes, there you go.
Sorry.
Or what do they call what was Harry Potter like when he was just training to be a wizard?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't remember.
What's the word for that? If you know the word for that, leave a comment on the website. Because I don't know. It's not Muggle, because Muggle is people who are not wizards.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Showing my ignorance of Harry Potter.
Same here.
But with that, I think it's time to say goodbye, and we'll see you next week, and let the British lady take it over.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen. Become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.